The Cryptid Investigator's Guide is a book that takes and frames the folklore behind cryptids and urban legend in the Call of Cthulhu framework. Now, as I said, there are no stats here. I'll stop my compulsive scrolling. There are no stats here. I leave those out, but I do give a lot of background information. I give a lot of lore information. I do give some real world references. And I'm not going to go over each one of these because I don't also want to spoil it. But for instance, I take Sasquatch and I give it a backstory that fits in with the Cthulhu mythos. And in each one, I tried to really not go into the common interpretations and tropes, especially a lot of what you see in the paranormal and cryptid investigation world. I tried to pull back on that. Though, ironically, of course, I'm listening to something or watching something on one of these cryptids last night or 2 nights ago. And by the way, the research on this was fun. Getting to dive into some of these cryptids for days at a time was really entertaining. And of course, they spouted a theory that I had put in this book before I even heard their discussion as to what these creatures actually are. I was like, well, okay. I guess my idea wasn't that original after all, but it's, that's the way things go. So we have Sasquatch. So we have a section called The Truth, and this is where I talk about what the nature of these creatures really are, and encounters, how people have historically described them being encountered, and characteristics, how they function in a game environment without any statistic information. And then I have the mythos connection. And that's where things start to get crazy, because that's where I talk about how they are connected to the greater mythos and eldritch horror. And then some scenario seeds. I have two per creature. And then I have, I have several. I have Sasquatch, and I have lesser known ones. But so the art in this is by both Sako Toomey. She did half the art, and Corey McNaught did the other half. Here's one of Corey's pieces. The Sasquatch is one of Sako's pieces. I did the layout of this, layout and design. So we'll see how that goes. Here are strange mists, something that I think I spoke about in my last podcast, in my last video cast, that I couldn't find much when I would type in strange mists or unusual fogs, there was a lot associated with ghosts. There was a lot associated with other sort of supernatural phenomena, but nothing about mists that act sentiently and anomalously on their own. And then I typed in paranormal mist, and I got this reservoir, this wealth of really weird stuff that people had described that fit what I was looking for. So there are strange mists, and again, they all follow the same format. And the Eldritch goblins, they were kind of fun. There are so many stories in our modern day of goblins or goblin-like creatures or imp-like creatures that terrorize people that I really felt it would be fun to address those as well. Nain Rouge and Easton Goblin, right in Easton, PA, not far from where Mepicon's going to be at. And I tried to keep the encounters a little non-traditional as well, not what you would normally think of. And let's see, the Black-Eyed Kids, they're always a favorite. They're very weird. The stories are very creepy, as they sound astonishing legends. If you believe any of it at all, it's kind of creepy. And who and what they are. I actually had someone who bought the book based off wanting to find out more about Black-Eyed Kids because he's using them in a Call of Cthulhu scenario. I was like, you've got it right there. And their mythos connection, I think, is kind of cool. It's something I've visited before in my games. The flying heads, the wood witches, flying heads. So I took the witch in the woods folklore, kind of Blair Witch, that sort of thing. I mean, that popularized it. But that sort of folklore has been around in the American and even the European and even other countries in their consciousness of these idea of this witch in the woods, where the witch is not just this woman who's casting spells, that it's a supernatural creature. And I mixed it with the folklore behind the flying heads. They're extremely common, shockingly. And I think I've said this before in other talks where I didn't know this many cultures around the world, particularly Southeast Asia and Indian subcontinent, and then the Native American mythologies also have these creatures where the head detaches from the body of this vampire-like creature, this witch-like creature, and goes out and drinks the blood of, or drinks the energy of, or otherwise haunts the living. So the witch was kind of fun to write up. That was interesting, and it was very challenging in terms of how I wanted to position it against the Cthulhu mythos. So there was an obvious lead in my mind. So the Fresno Nightcrawlers, they're definitely one of the strangest, and they were initially one of the most challenging. I had a vague idea of what I wanted them to be. There they are. They're one of the most enigmatic cryptids. They only exist online as far as anybody knows. Only some video footage of them. One famous video, then another very similar video from Yosemite a couple of years later, and then a few still photos and other video blips in which people claim that these night crawlers are a thing, that they're real. And a few accounts of people who say they've seen them in person in the flesh off video. Those are highly skeptical, and they could easily be attributed to tricks of the light and things like that at night. But anyway, they're these walking pants, basically, these walking phantom pants. And that's the only way you can really describe them. Some people say they have heads and eyes, other people don't. So they're kind of the cutest and most comical, and even the responses to them online are really always kind of weird. Like, these are actual online discussions I found of them. Like, honestly, I think they're kind of cute, eerie because of the fear of the unknown, but still endearing. Then another one is, not gonna lie, part of me is spooked, but the other part of me really wants to give the crawling pants a hug. And then they just walk along their way, wholesome, leave them alone. So people have this perception of the walk of these night crawlers as these kind of weird, friendly, almost ambivalent little creatures that just kind of wander through our reality here and there. So of course I made them probably the single most twisted in the entire book. The concept behind them is actually kind of horrifying, just from a perspective of what they do and where they come from. So they were a lot of fun to deal with. And then the lizard men, lizard people, reptile people, frog men of Loveland County. Again, which there is even beyond, stories like, the reptoids controlling the government. Of course, now for the first time in reality, I might actually believe that. But aside from that, there is not the wealth of sightings and folklore of Sasquatch, but there are a number of unrelated accounts of people talking about seeing these bipedal lizard-like creatures. So I wanted to use them, and I made them a little bit different than what I hope a little bit different than what people expect from them. And the sightings are sporadic but persistent. I mean, until one account I heard on a YouTube channel, which of course we all know how real that is. But anyway, assuming the account was real, early 2000s where somebody reported seeing them. And I also cover the frog people here, the frogmen of Loveland County, Ohio. And they're a little weirder because they seem to travel in a group, and they're reported to do almost like strange magic things, like literally like with a magic wand. And it's this really weird story, but I figured I'd lump these together and work with them. And I would make him this kind of fun, weird, but hopefully a little unexpected take on what you would expect the reptile creatures to be. So, moving on to the end, I have Mothman, one of everybody's favorite, the Mothman. So there's the moth being, again, put through the Lovecraft lens, through the mythos lens. And what they are and what they do is actually not too far different from what John Keel speculated in his famous book, The Mothman Prophecies. That was later turned into a movie, which apparently is, again, as usual, very little to do with the book. But I really actually kind of want to go read Mothman Prophecies now. Because I saw the movie years ago, and I was kind of like, that was weird. It wasn't what I thought. I thought it was going to be about the Mothman. Of course, that's the whole point of the movie. It's not about the Mothman. It's about all the weird disassociation with reality that happens afterwards. And that's actually what I talk about when encountering the Mothman. That encountering the Mothman is not really the big deal. It's all these things that start to become dissonant in reality after the Mothman has been sighted to the person and the people around them. who have encountered the Mothman or moth person. Again, Mothman, Lizard Man. I know I didn't want to just totally gender these creatures, but I did that. That's colloquially what they're known as. So I just kept that. And the Mothman is kind of the culmination of the book, the climax of the book, the end payoff. So there's the Cryptid Investigator's Guide, and that's kind of what you get. And again, you can find that over on Miskatonic Repository.